Hello and welcome to the Fireside Detectives Corner, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. I am Dr. John Watson, chronicler of the extraordinary exploits of my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In this tale, drawn from the annals of our shared adventures in the fog-shrouded streets of Victorian London, we delve into a case that began with a chilling discovery at the very heart of the city. The year was 1892, and the great dome of St. Paul's Cathedral loomed like a sentinel over a metropolis alive with the clatter of hansom cabs and the murmur of gaslit crowds. Yet, on one fateful morning, blood stained the ancient steps, drawing Holmes and myself into a web of deceit, ambition, and hidden vendettas. What follows is my account, divided into 10 chapters for your leisurely perusal, perhaps read one per evening, with a pipe or a cup of tea in hand. The full narrative spans approximately 13,500 words, crafted as a beginner mystery, with clues laid plainly for the astute reader to follow alongside Holmes. Engage with me, dear listener. Pause after each chapter to ponder the evidence, and share your deductions in the comments below. Who knows? You might unravel the thread before the master himself. Chapter 1. The Summons from the Shadows. Hello and welcome to the Fireside Detectives Corner, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. I am Dr. John Watson, your faithful chronicler of the remarkable deeds of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the consulting detective whose mind cuts through the fog of human deceit as surely as a lighthouse pierces the mist. In the autumn of 1892, as London lay swathed in a damp shroud of fog, a singular case came to our doorstep at 221B Baker Street, one that would lead us to the very steps of St. Paul's Cathedral, where blood had been spilled under the shadow of its mighty dome. Allow me to unfold the tale, dear reader, as it unfolded before us, with all the atmosphere of that gaslit, cobblestoned world. Pause at the chapter's end to ponder the clues, and share your thoughts. What secrets might lurk in the echo the city's somber mood? The notes hung in the air, weaving a spell, when a sharp rap at the door shattered the reverie. Mrs. Hudson, our indefatigable landlady, appeared, her face pale beneath her mob cap, her hands twisting in her apron. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, there's a gentleman to see you, a Mr. Elias Thorne. He's in a dreadful state, says it's a matter of life and death." Holmes laid his violin aside with a flourish, his gray eyes glinting with sudden interest. "Life and death, Mrs. Hudson. How delightfully unambiguous. Show him in at once." He turned to me, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Watson, prepare yourself. The fog brings more than damp today." Mrs. Hudson ushered in a tall, gaunt man whose appearance spoke of both urgency and despair. Mr. Elias Thorne was perhaps 45, clad in the sober black of a clerical assistant, though his attire was disheveled, his collar askew, his coat flecked with mud, and his boots scuffed as if he had run through half of London. His eyes, wide and haunted, darted about the room, and in his trembling hands he clutched a handkerchief, its white linen marred by dark, rusty stains that my medical eye instantly recognized as blood. Not his own, I noted, for his hands bore no wounds, but fresh enough to suggest recent violence. "Mr. Holmes," he gasped, sinking into the chair I offered. "I am the verger at St. Paul's Cathedral. This morning, as dawn broke through the fog, I found him, Archdeacon Reginald Hargrove, dead upon the great steps, stabbed through the heart, sir, with no weapon in sight, and not a soul to witness it. The police are at a loss, but I fear this is no simple crime. There are secrets, Mr. Holmes, secrets buried in the cathedral's very stones. Holmes leaned forward, his lean frame taut with attention, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Calm yourself, Mr. Thorne, and begin at the beginning. Watson, the brandy. Our guest requires fortification. Now, sir, tell us everything. And soon the police arrived. Inspector Lestrade and his men. They found no weapon, no purse, nothing but his gold pocket watch missing. An heirloom, engraved with his initials. Holmes's eyes narrowed. And the footprint? You hesitated when you mentioned the blood. Thorne paled further, if that were possible. You're right, sir. There was a footprint, a single one, in the blood, leading away toward Ludgate Hill. Small, like a woman's or a slight man's, with a queer drag on the left heel, as if the walker limped. I thought it odd, but the police dismissed it. Said the rain had muddled any tracks. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. Continue. Tell me of Hargrove, his enemies, his habits, his recent demeanor. Thorne drew a shaky breath. The archdeacon was a stern man, respected but not loved. He oversaw the cathedral's renovations. The dome, you know, has been under repair for structural weaknesses. He clashed often with Mr. Victor Langford, the architect, who claimed Hargrove's plans endangered the cathedral. Langford was furious when the archdeacon overruled him on materials, saying they were too costly. Then there's Silas Croft, a verger sacked last month for insubordination. Croft swore vengeance, claiming Hargrove ruined his livelihood. And there were whispers, sir, of funds missing from the restoration coffers. Anonymous letters arrived at the chapter house, accusing Hargrove of embezzlement, though he denied it fiercely. Holmes's fingers tapped a rhythm on the armrest. These letters, did you see them? One, sir. It was left on my desk, written in a crabbed hand. The blood of the innocent will stain your hands if you proceed. I showed it to Hargrove and he burned it, saying it was the work of a crank. Interesting, Holmes murmured. And Hargrove's routine? Was he often at the cathedral at such an hour? No, sir, that's the strangest part. He was usually abed by 10, a creature of habit. But last night, his appointment book, costermonger's cries muffled by the mist, and the looming shapes of omnibuses like ships adrift. Holmes sat silent, his eyes distant, already piecing together the puzzle. Thorne fidgeted beside me, his face a mask of dread, while I pondered the players in this drama. Langford, the ambitious architect, Croft, the vengeful outcast, and the shadowy figure behind those anonymous letters. What secrets did the cathedral hold, and whose hand had struck the fatal blow? We arrived at St. Paul's, its great dome a ghostly silhouette against the sky, the steps slick with rain and marked by chalk outlines where Hargrove had fallen. The game was afoot, and I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, tempered by the chill of a crime that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of London itself. Chapter 2. Footprints in the Fog. The hansom cab rattled through the fog-choked streets of London, the clip-clop of hooves dulled by the damp air, as if the city itself held its breath. It was the autumn of 1892, and the great dome of St. Paul's Cathedral loomed ahead, a spectral silhouette piercing the mist. The morning's drizzle had slickened the cobblestones, and gas lamps cast feeble halos, barely illuminating the bundled figures of early risers, costermongers, clerks and flower girls, moving like phantoms through the gloom. I, Dr. John Watson, sat beside Sherlock Holmes, his sharp profile etched against the cab's window, his eyes fixed on some inner calculus. Our client, Mr. Elias Thorne, the verger of St. Paul's, fidgeted opposite us, his gaunt face pale, the blood-stained handkerchief now tucked into his pocket but vivid in my memory. The weight of his tale, the murder of Archdeacon Reginald Hargrove stabbed on the cathedral steps, pressed upon us as we approached the scene of the crime. The cab halted with a lurch at the foot of St. Paul's, where the great steps ascended like a stone cascade toward the cathedral's portico. The fog clung to the columns, wreathing them in tendrils that seemed to whisper of secrets. To a shallow indentation, a footprint, small, deliberate, with a drag on the left heel, as Mr. Thorne described. Not the hurried step of a fleeing robber, but measured, calculated. Curious, don't you think? I peered over his shoulder, my medical eye noting the precision of the mark, barely visible against the wet stone. A limp, then, or an affectation to mislead? Holmes rose, brushing his hands. Precisely, Watson. A limp may be genuine, or it may be a costume donned for the occasion. We shall see. He turned to Lestrade, who was scribbling in a notebook. What else was found, Inspector? The watch, you say. Anything more? Lestrade shrugged. Just the body, the wound, and that missing watch. No weapon, no witnesses, save a flower seller down by Ludgate Hill who claimed she saw a cloaked figure running toward the Thames at dawn. And the beadle, old Mr. Grayson, heard a muffled cry around 5 o'clock but thought it was a drunkard. Holmes's eyes gleamed. A cloaked figure, a cry, and a single footprint. Hardly the bounty of evidence one might hope for, but sufficient to begin. Mr. Thorne, show us to the Archdeacon's office. And Lestrade, I'll need his appointment book and any personal effects recovered. Visual scene. Exterior of St. Paul's. Fog swirling around the great steps. Police cordon with bobbies in capes. Holmes kneeling with magnifying glass. Watson and Lestrade watching. Hansom cabs and shadowy figures in the background. Key visual moment for thumbnail. Holmes's silhouette against the cathedral's dome, lens catching the light, with the chalk outline stark on the steps, evoking the hunt for truth. Thorne led us through the north door, the cathedral's vast interior swallowing the sound of our footsteps. The nave stretched before us, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, the air heavy with the scent of wax and old stone. Gas lamps flickered along the walls, their light dancing on marble columns and stained glass that glowed dully through the fog's filter. We ascended a narrow staircase to the administrative offices, a warren of oak-paneled rooms cluttered yesterday, locking his door and muttering about meddling fools. Holmes's gaze swept the room, pausing on a smudged blueprint pinned to the wall. These renovations, costly, no doubt. And you mentioned whispers of embezzlement. Were there records of the funds? Thorne hesitated, then pointed to a locked cabinet. The ledgers are there, but only Hargrove and Canon Beaumont had keys. I noticed discrepancies, small sums unaccounted for, but I thought it clerical error. Holmes produced a slender pick from his pocket and had the cabinet open in moments, revealing a stack of ledgers. His fingers danced over the pages, his brow furrowing. Discrepancies indeed. Payments to an unnamed contractor, initials S.C. Silas Croft, perhaps, the sacked verger? Or another player in this game? He closed the ledger with a snap. Watson, note the pattern. Funds diverted, a midnight meeting, a stolen watch, and a footprint that does not flee. This is no robbery, but a tableau staged for our benefit. We ventured outside again, where the fog had thickened, cloaking the cathedral in secrecy. Holmes insisted on interviewing the witnesses Lestrade had mentioned. The flower seller, a wiry woman named Maggie with a basket of wilting violets, stood shivering by Ludgate Hill. "I saw him, sir," she said, her voice roughened by the cold. "A figure in a long cloak, moving quick toward the river, just as the cathedral bell struck 5. Couldn't see the face, but they limped, like left leg dragging a bit." Holmes pressed her gently. "The cloak, any distinguishing marks? A hat, perhaps, or a scarf?" Maggie squinted, thinking. "A scarf, aye. Dark red, flapping loose. Looked like a gent, but small-like, not burly." Holmes thanked her with a coin, then sought the beadle, Mr. Grayson, a stooped man with rheumy eyes who tended the cathedral grounds. "Heard a cry, I did," he said, leaning on his staff. Short Heartbeat of London's Ancient Stones. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Whispering Gallery. The fog that cloaked London in October 1892 seemed to seep into the very stones of St. Paul's Cathedral as we ascended the spiral staircase to the Whispering Gallery, high within the great dome. The air grew chill, carrying the faint scent of wax and damp stone, and each footfall echoed in the vast vaulted space, as if the cathedral itself were murmuring secrets. I, Dr. John Watson, followed Sherlock Holmes, whose lean figure moved with purpose, his eyes darting to every shadow. Beside us, Mr. Elias Thorne, the verger, led the way, his gaunt frame tense, his earlier distress now tempered by a nervous reticence. The blood-stained handkerchief, the limping footprint, and the missing pocket watch weighed heavily on my mind as we climbed. The memory of Archdeacon Hargrove's murder on the cathedral steps urging us onward. The Fireside Detective's Corner invites you, dear reader, to join us in this labyrinth of clues. Pause after this chapter to share your deductions, and let us unravel this mystery together over a warm cup of coffee. The Whispering Gallery, perched beneath the dome's vast curve, opened before us like a stage for secrets. Its circular walkway, lined with a low stone balustrade, overlooked the cathedral's nave far below, where gas lamps cast flickering shadows on marble and mosaic. The walls, adorned with murals of saints and apostles, seemed to watch us, their painted eyes solemn in the dim light. The gallery's peculiar acoustics, where a whisper against the wall could be heard clear across the dome, lent an eerie intimacy to the space. As if every word might betray a hidden truth, Holmes paused, his head tilted, testing the effect with a low murmur. "Watson, the walls listen," his voice carried to me, crisp and uncanny, from 30 feet away. "Remarkable," I said, my voice echoing back. "A fitting place for secrets, Holmes." "Indeed," he replied, his gray eyes scanning the gallery. "And secrets, I suspect, are at the heart of this affair." Reinforcement bears annotations in 2 hands, Hargrove's and another, less steady. "And here," he lifted a crumpled letter from beneath a ledger, an unsigned note, in the same crabbed script Thorne described. "The blood of the innocent will stain your hands if you proceed." A threat, or a distraction? I peered at the letter, its ink faded but legible. Could it be Silas Croft's work? The sacked verger, bitter over his dismissal? Holmes's lips twitched. A possibility, Watson, but Croft's radical sermons suggest passion, not this calculated menace. Let us see what else the room yields. He turned to the ledgers, flipping through pages with swift precision. Here, discrepancies in the restoration funds. Sums allocated for stonework, yet no corresponding invoices. Payments to SC again, and others to an unnamed recipient. Hargrove was either negligent or complicit. Thorne, hovering by the door, shifted uncomfortably. I told the Archdeacon of the error, sir, but he insisted they were oversights. He grew secretive these past weeks, bucking this room even during the day. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Secretive, you say? And yet he met with VL at midnight. Let us search for more. He knelt by the desk, his fingers probing the underside until a faint click sounded. A hidden drawer sprang open, revealing a small silver locket, its surface engraved with a rose. Inside was a miniature portrait of a young woman, her features delicate, her expression somber. A keepsake, I said, examining it. Hargrove's niece, perhaps? Or a secret tied to the funds? Holmes pocketed the locket, his expression unreadable. A clue, Watson, but its meaning eludes us yet. A niece, a lover, or a pawn in a larger game. We must tread carefully. The cathedral stones whisper, but they do not yet speak plainly. Visual scene. Interior of the Whispering Gallery, vast and echoing, with murals glowing faintly. Holmes and the cathedral. Thorne frowned, rubbing his temple. Once he spoke of a niece in passing, a Miss Clara Hargrove living in Bloomsbury, but he was private about her, said she was frail and kept from society. Holmes nodded, filing the detail away. Clara Hargrove, a name to pursue. Now, let us examine the gallery itself. Its acoustics may hide more than whispers. We returned to the Whispering Gallery, where the faint hum of morning prayers drifted up from the nave below. Holmes walked the circumference, pausing at intervals to tap the walls or lean close, as if the stone might confess its secrets. At one point he stopped, his ear pressed to the wall near a mural of St. Paul. Listen, Watson, he said softly. A hollow space, subtle but present. The cathedral is old, its renovations ongoing. Concealed passages, perhaps? Thorne blanched. There are old tunnels, sir, from Wren's time, used for storage or repairs. But they're sealed, or so I thought. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Sealed, yet not impenetrable. We shall explore them anon. For now, let us consider the players. Langford, with his muddy boots and late-night meeting. Croft, the scapegoat with a grudge. Beaumont, the canon with influence. And this Clara, a shadow in the background. The footprint, the handkerchief, the locket, all pieces, but the puzzle is incomplete. As we descended the staircase, the cathedral's organs swelled, its notes reverberating through the stone, a solemn counterpoint to the mystery unfolding. I glanced at Thorne, whose limp, slight but noticeable, matched the footprint's description. Was it coincidence, or a clue he unwittingly carried? The unsigned letter nagged at me. A threat, yes, but also a misdirection, as Holmes suggested. And the locket, with its portrait of a woman who might hold the key to Hargrove's secrets. What role did she play? The fog outside had thickened, cloaking the cathedral in a veil of secrecy as we emerged into the nave. Holmes's mind was already racing ahead, piecing together the threads of footprint, funds, and hidden compartments. Muffled cries of street vendors. I, Dr. John Watson, followed Sherlock Holmes, whose purposeful stride cut through the gloom as we made our way toward the Thames, where Victor Langford, the architect embroiled in Archdeacon Hargrove's murder, kept his offices. Our client, Mr. Elias Thorne, had remained behind, his limping gait and nervous demeanor lingering in my thoughts. The blood-stained handkerchief, the limping footprint, the mysterious locket, and the cryptic VL in Hargrove's appointment book swirled in my mind, each a thread in the tapestry of deceit Holmes was determined to unravel. Dear reader, as we delve deeper into this mystery at the Fireside Detective's Corner, pause to sip your coffee and ponder the clues. What secrets might Langford's ledgers reveal? Share your deductions and let us chase the truth through London's fog. Our cab rattled along the embankment, the Thames a sluggish, unseen presence to our left, its waters whispering beneath the mist. Holmes sat silent, his fingers steepled, his eyes distant as he sifted the morning's findings. The chalk dust on the cathedral steps, the unsigned threat in Hargrove's study, and the locket with its portrait of a young woman, possibly Clara Hargrove, the archdeacon's niece. "Watson," he said at last, "the midnight meeting with VL suggests Langford, but the architect's role is unclear. Is he a conspirator, a victim, or a convenient scapegoat? His offices will tell us more." We alighted at a bustling warehouse district near Blackfriars Bridge, where Langford's architectural firm occupied a soot-stained building amid stacks of stone and timber. The air rang with the clang of hammers and the shouts of workmen, scaffolds rising like skeletal fingers into the fog. Inside, the office was a hive of activity. Draftsmen hunched over tables, blueprints pinned to walls, and models of arches and domes cluttering every surface. Victor Langford greeted us with a forced smile. A robust man in his late 30s, his cluttered desk bears entries that intrigue me. "May I?" Langford hesitated, then nodded, his jaw tight. Holmes flipped through the pages, his magnifying glass hovering over columns of figures. "Payments to SC," he said, his voice low. "Silas Croft, perhaps, the sacked verger, or another. And here sums allocated for materials that never reached the cathedral. Care to explain?" Visual: foggy Thames embankment, warehouse district bustling with workmen, interior of Langford's office, blueprints and models scattered, gas lamps casting warm glow. Key visual moment for thumbnail: close-up of Langford's muddy boots beside a blueprint, Holmes's lens glinting, hinting at a connection to the crime scene. Langford's face reddened. "Those are legitimate expenses. Hargrove cut my budget, forcing me to source cheaper stone. Croft was a consultant, briefly before his dismissal. As for the mud, I visit the cathedral daily. It's no surprise." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Daily, yet this clay is fresh, undisturbed by rain. And this entry, SC, 50 pounds miscellaneous, lacks detail. A bribe, perhaps, to silence a disgruntled employee." He closed the ledger with a snap. "Your feud with Hargrove was well known. He overruled your designs, threatened your reputation. A motive, Mr. Langford?" The architect slammed a fist on the desk, scattering pencils. "Motive? Yes, I despised his interference. But murder? I'm no killer. My investors, Mr. Harrow and Mrs. Pennington, were with me all night. Check their statements with Lestrade." Holmes nodded, unperturbed. "We shall. But tell me, did Hargrove mention a niece, Clara, or receive anonymous letters? Langford frowned, his anger cooling. Unease? No, he was private, almost monastic. Letters, though. He showed me one, weeks ago, accusing him of embezzling restoration funds. He laughed it off, said it was spite from a rival. I thought it nonsense. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Nonsense. Langford's boots. I considered, my medical precision guiding me. Fresh, as you said, Holmes. If he was here all night, as he claims, the mud suggests a visit to the cathedral closer to dawn, near the time of the murder. Langford bristled. I was there yesterday afternoon, not dawn. The fog traps mud, it proves nothing. Holmes's smile was enigmatic. Nothing, or everything. We shall see. He turned to a stack of correspondence on a side table, flipping through letters until he paused at one, its seal broken but bearing the cathedral's crest. This, addressed to Hargrove, yet here. A draft, perhaps. Cease your interference, or the dome will fall. Unsigned, but the hand matches the ledger's annotations. Langford paled. That's not mine. Someone must have placed it here, Croft maybe, or one of Hargrove's enemies in the clergy. Holmes pocketed the letter. A red herring, Watson, or a genuine clue planted to incriminate. The plot thickens. He thanked Langford with a nod, his courtesy masking the intensity of his scrutiny. We shall return, Mr. Langford. Your alibi will be tested. As we stepped back into the fog, the warehouse's clamor faded, replaced by the river's low murmur. I glanced at Holmes, whose mind was clearly weaving the threads. The muddy boots, the ledger's discrepancies, the letter's echo of the one in Hargrove's study. Langford's defensive, I said, but his alibi seems solid. Could he have slipped out, killed Hargrove, and returned? Holmes's eyes glinted. Possible, but unlikely. The investor's presence complicates the timeline. Yet the mud and the letter suggest proximity to the crime. We must verify his alibi and pursue Croft. The SC payments are no coincidence. We hailed a cab, the fog swirling thicker now, cloaking the city in secrecy. The cathedral loomed in my memory, its steps stained with blood, its galleries whispering of hidden truths. Langford's muddy boots and cryptic ledger pointed to involvement. But was he killer, accomplice, or pawn? Dome a ghostly sentinel above the mist-shrouded streets. The air carried the tang of coal and wet stone, and the distant clatter of hansom cabs mingled with the mournful toll of church bells. I, Dr. John Watson, walked beside Sherlock Holmes, whose keen eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase, his mind weaving together the threads of Archdeacon Reginald Hargrove's murder. The blood-stained handkerchief, the limping footprint, the locket with its mysterious portrait, and the cryptic ledger entries pointing to intrigue. Our client, Mr. Elias Thorne, had parted ways with us, his nervous demeanor and faint limp lingering in my thoughts as we entered the cathedral's precincts to confront Canon Elias Beaumont, a figure of authority whose shadow loomed over the case. Dear reader, as we gather at the fireside detective's corner, sip your coffee and ponder the clues. What secrets lurk among the clergy? Share your deductions and let us unravel this Victorian mystery together. The cathedral's nave swallowed us in its vastness, the gas lamps casting a golden glow on marble columns and stained glass, their colors muted by the fog filtering through high windows. The air was heavy with incense, and the faint echo of a choir practicing in a distant chapel, their voices rising like a prayer for the departed Hargrove. Holmes led the way to the chapter house, a crypt-like chamber tucked beneath the cathedral's south transept. its low ceiling and stone walls lending an oppressive weight to our mission. The room was lit by flickering candles, their light dancing on oak paneling and portraits of stern-faced deans, as if the past watched our every move. Canon Beaumont awaited us, a portly man in his 50s, his black cassock immaculate, his face a mask of solemn dignity marred by a flicker of unease. His hands, clasped before him, bore the calluses of a man accustomed to turning pages rather than wielding weapons. Yet his eyes held a guarded sharpness. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice resonant with clerical authority. "I am grieved by Hargrove's death, but I fail to see how I can assist beyond what I've told Inspector Lestrade." Ironclad alibi. Beaumont nodded, his expression serene. "Indeed. The choir master and 12 boys can attest to my presence from 4 until 6. I was unaware of the tragedy until Thorne's outcry." Holmes's eyes narrowed, catching a glint of candlelight on the floor. A scrap of torn fabric, crimson and gold, snagged on a protruding nail in the paneling. He knelt, retrieving it with his handkerchief. "Curious," he said, holding it to the light. "A ceremonial robe, perhaps. The weave matches those worn by the chapter clergy, and this crimson hue suggests rank." "Yours, Canon?" Beaumont's composure faltered, his hand brushing his cassock. "Many robes are stored here, Mr. Holmes. It could belong to any of us, or none. The chapter house is used for meetings, not just by me." Holmes pocketed the fabric, his expression unreadable. Yet this thread, fresh torn, was found near blood on the steps, as Lestrade's report confirms. A coincidence, or a clue? He turned to a table strewn with papers, minutes of chapter meetings, budgets for the dome's repairs. These records show Hargrove's reforms met resistance. Who opposed him most? Beaumont hesitated, then sighed. Deacon Morley, perhaps, a traditionalist who disliked Hargrove's zeal. And Silas Croft, before his dismissal, preached against what he called Hargrove's vanity projects. But murder? Surely not within these sacred walls. Holmes's fingers tapped a rhythm on the table. Sacred walls hide human frailties, Canon. Tell me of Croft, his dismissal, his threats. Beaumont's voice grew stern. Croft was insubordinate, railing against Hargrove in sermons, accusing him of corruption. We sacked him for sowing discord. He vowed revenge, but I thought it bluster. He's vanished since, or so Thorne says. Holmes nodded, his gaze drifting to a locked cabinet in the corner, and the anonymous letters accusing Hargrove of embezzlement. Did you see them? One, Beaumont admitted, producing a key to open the cabinet. Hargrove showed a crimson thread against a candle's flame. Shadows of clergy portraits looming, evoking intrigue and suspicion. I studied Beaumont, his calm demeanor at odds with the nervous twitch of his fingers. Canon, I ventured. Did Hargrove mention a niece, Clara? We found a locket in his study, possibly hers. Beaumont's brow furrowed. Clara Hargrove. Yes. A frail girl living in Bloomsbury. Hargrove was protective, rarely spoke of her. She visited the cathedral once, a quiet thing, always with a book. I doubt she's involved. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Doubt is the detective's enemy, Canon. Every thread matters. He turned to me, his voice low. Watson, the fabric is fresh. The letter deliberate. Beaumont's alibi holds, but his proximity to Hargrove's enemies and this thread suggests entanglement. We must pursue Croft and Clara. But first, the undercroft. If secrets are buried, they lie below. We left the chapter house, descending back to the nave, where the choir's hymns swelled, a haunting counterpoint to the mystery. The torn fabric nagged at me. Its crimson hue matched Beaumont's ceremonial robes. But could it belong to another? The letters, too, seemed a calculated misdirection, pointing fingers at Croft or Langford while shielding the true culprit. And Clara Hargrove, the silent figure in the locket. What role did she play in this ecclesiastical drama? Holmes paused by a pillar, his gaze sweeping the nave. Observe, Watson. The cathedral is a stage, its players cloaked in piety. Beaumont's resistance to Hargrove's reforms, Croft's dismissal, the missing funds, all converge. Yet the footprint and handkerchief suggest a personal vendetta, not a clerical conspiracy. We must test each thread. As we prepared to explore the undercroft, I glanced back at the chapter house door, its shadow deep and unyielding. Beaumont's alibi was strong, but the torn fabric linked him to the crime scene. Was he a bystander? The air was damp and chill, heavy with the must of centuries, and the faint hum of the cathedral's organ above felt like a distant heartbeat. I, Dr. John Watson, followed Sherlock Holmes, whose lantern cast flickering light on the rough-hewn walls, illuminating cobwebs and ancient carvings. Mr. Elias Thorne, the verger, guided us, his limp more pronounced in the confined space, his face pale as he clutched the keys to the cathedral's secrets. The blood-stained handkerchief, the limping footprint, the locket's portrait, and the ledger's discrepancies swirled in my mind, each a piece of the puzzle surrounding Archdeacon Reginald Hargrove's murder. Dear reader, as we delve deeper at the fireside detective's corner, pause with your coffee to ponder. What truths lie buried in the cathedral's depths? Share your deductions, and let us unravel this Victorian mystery together. The undercroft was a maze of low arches and narrow passages, used for storage and repairs since Wren's time. Thorne led us past crates of candles and stacks of hymnals to a sealed door, its iron hinges rusted but intact. "This is the old relic vault," he said, his voice echoing faintly. "It's been locked for years, used only for sacred artifacts. Hargrove inspected it last month, said it was secure." Holmes's eyes gleamed in the lantern's glow. "Secure, yet secrets have a way of escaping." "Open it, Mr. Thorne." The verger fumbled with his keys, the lock grinding as it yielded. The door creaked open, revealing a small chamber, its walls lined with stone shelves. Dust motes danced in the light, and the air was thick with the scent of old metal and decay. On the shelves lay relics, chalices, reliquaries, and a tarnished cross, glinting faintly. But Holmes's attention fixed on a wooden chest in the corner, its lid ajar. He knelt, his magnifying glass hovering over the chest. "Observe, Watson," he said, lifting a leather-bound journal from within. "Hargrove's private notes, hidden where none would look. And this," he held up a small, ornate box, its Langford over faulty materials, perhaps diverting funds himself. And here, he opened the ornate box, revealing letters tied with twine. Correspondence, addressed to Hargrove but unsigned. The same hand as the threats. "Cease your greed or the cathedral will be your tomb." A pattern, Watson, of coercion and concealment. Visual scene. Dark undercroft, lantern light casting eerie shadows on stone arches. Holmes examining the chest, journal open, relics glinting faintly. Key visual moment for thumbnail. Holmes holding the journal, the rose-engraved box beside him, relics glowing eerily in the background, evoking hidden secrets. Thorne shifted nervously, his limp evident as he hovered near the door. "I knew nothing of this vault's contents, sir," he said. "Hargrove kept it secret, even from me. Those relics, some are valuable, meant for the cathedral's museum." Holmes's gaze flicked to him. Valuable, and missing from the ledgers. Stolen, perhaps, or sold to cover Hargrove's debts, or another's. He examined the chest's lock, noting scratches around the keyhole. "Forced entry, recently. Someone else has been here, Watson. The dust is disturbed, and these scratches are fresh." I peered at the lock, my medical eye noting the precision of the marks. "A professional, then? Or someone with access like Thorne?" Holmes's lips twitched. Access or desperation. Thorne. Who else knew of this vault? The verger paled. "Only the chapter clergy. Beaumont, Morley, and Hargrove. And the workmen, perhaps, from the renovations. I swear I thought it sealed." Holmes rose, pocketing the journal and a letter. "Sealed, yet beautifully. We must to breach, yet breached. We must trace these relics, where they went and who profited." He turned to the shelves, inspecting a chalice with a chipped rim. This was catalogued in the ledgers, yet unmarked here. A theft disguised as oversight, perhaps to fund Hargrove's schemes or to frame him. We left the vault. Locket suggests a personal tie, not a clerical one. We ventured to the cathedral's archives, a dusty room adjacent to the chapter house, to cross-reference the relics. The records confirmed Holmes's suspicion. Several items, a chalice, a reliquary, a gold-plated cross, were unaccounted for, their absence noted only in Hargrove's private journal. "A cover-up," I said, "but by whom? Hargrove, to fund his niece's care? Or someone framing him?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Framing, Watson. The letters, the missing relics, the footprint, all point to a scapegoat. Croft is the obvious target, but Thorne's limp and Beaumont's torn robe thread complicate the picture. We must test the alibis and trace the relic's buyer." As we emerged into the nave, the fog outside pressed against the windows, cloaking the cathedral in secrecy. The journal's weight in Holmes's pocket was a tangible clue, its pages linking Hargrove's blackmail to Langford and Croft's dismissal. But the letter's recurring threats, "The cathedral will be your tomb," suggested a deeper vendetta, perhaps within the clergy itself. Clara Hargrove remained a shadow, her portrait in the locket a silent question mark. Visual scene. Under Croft's dim passages, lantern light on relics and cobwebs. Vault interior with Holmes opening the chest, journal and letters revealed. Archives with dusty tomes, Holmes poring over records. Key visual moment, Holmes holding the journal. Lantern illuminating the rose-engraved box, relics casting eerie reflections, hinting at buried truths. Thorne lingered behind, his face drawn. "Mr. Holmes, I swear I knew nothing of theft. Hargrove was secretive, but I trusted him." Holmes's gaze was piercing. "Trust is a luxury, Mr. Thorne. Your limp matches the footprint. Explain it." Thorne flinched. "An old war injury, sir, from my time in the Crimea. It worsens in damp weather, but I was at my post, not the steps, at dawn." Holmes nodded, unconvinced. We shall verify. Gloom. I, Dr. John Watson, sat beside Sherlock Holmes, whose sharp features were etched with concentration, his mind weaving together the threads of Archdeacon Reginald Hargrove's murder. The blood-stained handkerchief, the limping footprint, the locket's portrait, the hidden vault's journal, and the cryptic ledgers pointing to embezzlement and blackmail. Our destination was Scotland Yard, where Inspector Lestrade awaited with the suspect's alibis, a tangle we hope to unravel. Dear reader, as we gather at the fireside detective's corner, sip your coffee and ponder the clues. What lies behind the alibis of Thorne, Langford, and Beaumont? Share your deductions, and let us chase the truth through this Victorian labyrinth. The cab deposited us at the yard's grim facade, its windows glowing faintly through the fog. Inside, Lestrade's office was a cluttered bastion of order amid chaos, maps and timelines pinned to the walls, a chalkboard scrawled with names and hours. Lestrade, his bowler hat askew, greeted us with his usual mix of exasperation and curiosity. "Holmes, you've stirred up a hornet's nest," he said, gesturing to a stack of reports. "Thorne, Langford, Beaumont, all with alibis, all with reasons to dislike Hargrove. But no murder weapon, no clear motive. What's your angle?" Holmes's eyes gleamed as he surveyed the room. "My angle, Lestrade, is precision. Alibis are threads, some hold, some fray. Lay out the timelines, and let us test their weave." He settled into a chair, his long fingers steepled, as Lestrade spread out the documents. "First, Elias Thorne," Lestrade began, tapping a page. "The verger claims he was at his post in the Cathedral's north vestry from 4 to 6 a.m., preparing for morning prayers. A beadle, Grayson, saw him at 5, but no one else confirms his presence until he found Hargrove's body at 5:30. His limp matches the footprint. A war injury, he says, from the Crimea." Holmes nodded, his gaze fixed on the timeline. "Rain? Unlikely. The ledger in his office showed payments to SC, possibly Silas Croft. And Hargrove's journal suggests blackmail over shoddy materials. Langford's alibi is strong, but a brief absence could go unnoticed. What of his character? Hot-tempered, Lestrade said. Hated Hargrove's interference. But his investors are respectable, no reason to lie for him." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Respectability is a mask, Lestrade. A man may leave a room for 10 minutes and return unnoticed. Now, Canon Beaumont." Lestrade pointed to a third page. "Beaumont says he was at choir practice in the Cathedral's South Chapel from 4 to 6 a.m., with 12 boys and the choir master as witnesses. Ironclad, unless they're all lying. That crimson thread you found in the chapter house matches his ceremonial robe, but he says those robes are shared among the clergy." Holmes examined the thread, still in his handkerchief. "Fresh torn, Watson, and found near blood on the steps. Beaumont's alibi holds, but his proximity to Hargrove's reforms and the missing funds suggests motive. The anonymous letters accusing Hargrove of embezzlement passed through his hands. A coincidence?" I studied the timelines, my medical precision noting gaps. "Thorne's alibi is the weakest," I said. "Half an hour unaccounted for, and his limp matches the footprint. But Langford's mud and Beaumont's thread tie them to the scene. Could they be working together?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "A conspiracy, Watson? Possible. but the evidence suggests a single hand, cloaked in misdirection. The footprint, handkerchief, and stolen watch are theatrical, designed to scatter suspicion. Let us examine the personal effects. Lestrade produced a box containing Hargrove's belongings, a prayer book, a key ring, and a crumpled note, overlooked in the initial search. Holmes seized the note, his magnifying glass hovering. In Hargrove's hand, meet SC at crypt, 4 a.m. Silas, I frowned, piecing it together. Thorne's access to the cathedral, the handkerchief, the vault. He could have staged it all. But Beaumont's thread and Langford's mud muddy the waters. Holmes nodded. Muddy indeed. The locket's portrait, Clara Hargrove, remains a shadow. Her frailty, mentioned by Beaumont and Thorne, may be a pretext. We must find her, and Croft. He rose, his energy galvanizing the room. Lestrade, verify Langford's investors and the choir's statements. Watson, we'll pursue Croft to the docks. The alibis are a web, but one thread will break. We left the yard, the fog thicker now, swallowing the city's edges. The timelines danced in my mind. Thorne's half-hour gap, Langford's muddy boots, Beaumont's thread. Each alibi held, yet each had a flaw. The note to SC suggested a meeting gone wrong, but the stolen watch and handkerchief felt staged, pointing to a killer who knew the cathedral's rhythms. Clara Hargrove's name lingered, a silent figure tied to the locket and Hargrove's journal, her role unclear. As our cab rattled toward the docks, Holmes leaned back, his eyes distant. Watson, the alibis are a performance, the cathedral a stage. The footprint mimics Thorne, the thread implicates Beaumont, the mud accuses Langford. Yet the journal's blackmail and the vault's relics point to a deeper motive. Greed or revenge, cloaked in piety. The docks loomed ahead, a maze of warehouses and cranes shrouded in mist. The air reeked of tar and fish, and the Thames's low murmur underscored our pursuit. We questioned a tavern keeper who recalled Croft's rants against Hargrove, but no recent sightings. He's gone to ground, I said, frustrated. A fugitive or a victim? Holmes's gaze swept the river. A pawn, Watson. The killer wants us chasing Croft, while the true motive lies elsewhere, perhaps with Clara, or the missing funds. The alibis are tangled. Locket's portrait, the hidden vault's journal, and the tangled alibis of Thorne, Langford, and Beaumont. Croft's disappearance, marked by his rants against Hargrove, suggested either guilt or a deeper deception. Dear reader, as we gather at the fireside detective's corner, sip your coffee and ponder. Where does Croft's trail lead? Share your deductions, and let us unravel this Victorian mystery together. Holmes's eyes scanned the docks, their shadows alive with dockers and sailors moving like specters. Watson, he said, his voice low. Croft is the bait in this trap, a red herring to divert us from the true killer. His threats, the SC payments in Langford's ledger, the note in Hargrove's hand, all point to him, yet too neatly. We must find him, not to accuse, but to unmask the puppeteer. We began at the Rusty Anchor, a tavern near Blackfriars where Croft was last seen. The interior was a haze of pipe smoke and ale fumes, its rough-hewn tables crowded with dockhands and river rats. The tavern keeper, A burly man with a scarred cheek squinted at us. "Croft? Aye, he was here 2 nights ago, ranting about Hargrove robbing the poor. Said he'd make him pay. Haven't seen him since, likely holed up in some flophouse." Holmes's gaze swept the room, noting a sailor in a corner, his cap pulled low. "That man," he murmured, "watches us too closely. Follow my lead." He approached the sailor, who started and tried to slip away. Holmes's hand shot out, grasping his arm. "A moment, sir. You know Silas Croft. Where is he?" The sailor, a wiry fellow named Jem, paled under Holmes's scrutiny. "I ain't done nothing. Croft paid me to pass a message. Said to meet him at the old warehouse by Wapping Stairs midnight tonight. Swore he was in trouble, not causing it." Holmes released him with a nod. "Trouble indeed. Watson, we shall attend this rendezvous, but first, the warehouse. Daylight may reveal what midnight conceals." Paper tucked under a crate. A receipt, dated yesterday, for a pawn shop in Whitechapel. Items listed: a gold chalice and a reliquary. The vault's relics, Watson. Visual scene: foggy docks, lanterns swinging, ship's masts piercing the mist. Warehouse interior, Holmes's lantern casting shadows on crates and footprints. Key visual moment for thumbnail: Holmes examining the receipt, lantern light on the fake footprint, relic silhouettes in the background, evoking a trail of deception. The receipt bore the name J. Smith, a likely alias, but the pawnshop's address was clear. We hastened to Whitechapel, the fog now a suffocating veil, the streets alive with hawkers and ragged children. The pawnshop, a dingy storefront, was tended by a wizened man with shrewd eyes. "Aye, I bought a chalice and reliquary," he said, producing them from a locked case. "Man called himself Smith, small, limping, wore a red scarf. Paid well, no questions asked." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "A red scarf, like the flower seller's cloaked figure. Describe him." The pawnbroker shrugged. "Hard to see, with the fog and his cap low. Nervous, though, kept looking over his shoulder. Said he'd be back for more." Holmes examined the relics, their engravings matching the vault's inventory. "Stolen, Watson, to fund a flight or a frame. Croft is either the thief or the scapegoat." We returned to the warehouse tonight. As dusk fell, we staked out the warehouse, concealed in an alley's shadows. The fog muffled all sound, save the lapping Thames and distant foghorns. At midnight, a figure emerged, a slight man, limping, a red scarf trailing from his coat. "Croft," I whispered, but Holmes gripped my arm. "Wait," he hissed. The figure entered the warehouse and we followed, silent as specters. Inside, the man lit a candle, revealing Silas Croft's haggard face, his eyes wild with fear. "Who's there?" he called, brandishing a knife. Holmes stepped into the light. Note: return to Scotland Yard, Mr. Croft. Tell Lestrade everything. You're safer in custody than in this fog." Croft nodded, fear etched in his face, and slipped into the night. Visual scene: warehouse at midnight, fog swirling, candlelight on Croft's terrified face. Holmes holding the threatening note, boots in foreground. Key visual moment: Holmes comparing Croft's boots to the footprint sketch, red scarf on the floor, revealing the frame-up. As we returned to Baker Street, the fog seemed to mirror the case's complexity. "Croft's innocence is clear," I said. The footprint was staged, the relics planted. But who? Thorne with his limp, Langford with his muddy boots, or Beaumont with his torn robe? Holmes's eyes glinted. The killer is cunning, Watson, using Croft as a decoy. The red scarf links to the flower seller's sighting, but it's too convenient, a prop like the handkerchief. The relic's sale suggests funds for a purpose, escape, or silencing a witness. Clara Hargrove remains a shadow tied to the locket and journal. At 221B, Holmes spread the clues on the table. The handkerchief, the locket, the journal, the crimson thread, the receipt, and the latest note. "A pattern, Watson," he said. "The footprint mimics Thorne. The thread points to Beaumont. The mud accuses Langford, and the relics frame Croft. Yet the journal's blackmail and Clara's name anchor the motive. We must find her, and the relic's buyer." The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls as Holmes lit his pipe. "The red herring's trail ends here, Watson, but the true path lies ahead. Perhaps in Clara's Bloomsbury home, or the cathedral's depths. The killer is close, watching us chase shadows." Chapter 9. Convergence at the Dome. The fog that enveloped London in October 1892 seemed to pulse with secrets as we returned to St. Paul's Cathedral, its great dome a brooding sentinel piercing the stormy sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the air crackled with the promise of rain, mirroring the tension of the case. I, Dr. John Watson, followed Sherlock Holmes, Thorne, Langford, and Beaumont to the Golden Gallery, the narrow walkway encircling the cathedral's dome, where the city sprawled below like a map of secrets. The ascent was arduous, a spiral staircase winding through stone passages, the air growing colder as we climbed. Thorne led the way, his limp pronounced, his face pale as he clutched the railing. Langford followed, his muddy boots echoing, his expression a mix of defiance and unease. Beaumont, in his black cassock, brought up the rear, his composure strained, the crimson thread from his robe a silent accusation in my memory. The storm outside growled, lightning flashing through high windows, casting stark shadows on the walls. We emerged onto the Golden Gallery, the wind whipping our coats, the fog now a roiling sea below, pierced by the spires of London's skyline. The dome's curve loomed above, its leaden surface slick with impending rain. Holmes stood at the balustrade, his silhouette stark against the stormy sky, his voice cutting through the wind. "Gentlemen," he said, "we stand at the heart of this mystery. Hargrove's murder was no robbery, but a calculated act, its clues strewn to mislead. A footprint to mimic Thorne, a thread to implicate Beaumont, mud to accuse Langford, and relics to frame Croft. Tonight the truth will rise." Thorne's eyes darted, his hands trembling. "Mr. Holmes, I've told all I know. I found the body, nothing more." Langford's voice was sharp. "And I was with investors, as I said. My boots mean nothing. Mud is common enough." Beaumont's tone was measured but tense. "My alibi is unshakable, Mr. Holmes. The choir confirms my presence. This thread you speak of, it could be anyone's." Holmes's smile was cold. "Alibis are fragile, gentlemen, when motives align. Hargrove's journal reveals blackmail, extorting Langford over shoddy materials, dismissing Croft for probing funds, and clashing with Beaumont over reforms." The locked voice steady. "Your limp, Mr. Thorne, matches the footprint. A war injury, you claim. Yet the drag is inconsistent, as if staged. The handkerchief, dipped in blood, was found in your possession. You had access to the vault, where relics were stolen, and to Hargrove's study, where the locket was hidden. Why? Thorne's face crumpled. I swear I found the handkerchief by the body. My limp is real, ask any doctor. I knew of the vault, yes, but Hargrove locked it himself. Holmes turned to Langford. Your boots, sir, carry cathedral clay, fresh at dawn. Your ledger shows payments to S.C., not Croft, but a cover for your own dealings. Hargrove's journal accuses you of shoddy work. Did you silence him? Langford's fists clenched. I was at my office. The muds from earlier visits, those payments were for supplies, not bribes. Hargrove's blackmail was his own greed, not mine. Holmes's gaze shifted to Beaumont. And you, Canon, opposed Hargrove's reforms. The crimson thread torn from a ceremonial robe places you near the steps. The letters passed through your hands. Were you protecting the chapter's honor, or your own? Beaumont's voice was icy. My robe is one of many. I was at prayers, as 12 witnesses attest. Hargrove's ambition threatened us all, but I am no murderer. Lightning cracked, illuminating their faces, Thorne's fear, Langford's anger, Beaumont's defiance. I gripped my revolver, sensing the tension's peak. Holmes, I whispered. The clues point everywhere, yet nowhere. Clara Hargrove. Could she be the key? Holmes nodded, his eyes never leaving the suspects. Clara. The silent thread. Hargrove's journal mentions her care, funded by diverted money. The locket ties her to him, but her absence is telling. Watson, fetch the note from the vault. I produced it, its script stark. Cease your greed, or the for gambling. You killed him to silence him, staging the scene to implicate Croft, Langford, and Beaumont. Thorne staggered, lightning revealing his ashen face. No, I loved the cathedral. Hargrove was the thief, not me. Holmes stepped closer. The locket was your sister's, pawned for your debts, not Clara's. Hargrove kept it as leverage. You wrote the letters, planted the relics, and faked the footprint. Confess, or the storm will not be your only judgment. Thorne's resolve broke, tears mixing with rain. It was me. Hargrove threatened to expose me, ruin my family. I stabbed him at dawn, used the blood to frame Langford, the footprint to point to Croft. The relics, I sold them to flee. Holmes signaled Lestrade, waiting below, to take Thorne. As the verger was led away, the storm broke, rain lashing the dome. Watson, Holmes said. The case nears its end. The alibis held. But the chalk dust and journal betrayed the truth. Clara was a fiction, a misdirection to shield Thorne's sister. The cathedral's bells tolled, a solemn echo as we descended, the mystery unraveling beneath the storm's wrath. Chapter 10. The Deduction and the Dawn. The fog that had cloaked London throughout the autumn of 1892 began to lift as dawn broke over Baker Street, its first rays piercing the mist like a revelation. The fire in our lodgings at 221B crackled warmly, casting a golden glow across the cluttered room, where papers, maps, and clues from Archdeacon Reginald Hargrove's murder lay strewn across the table. I, Dr. John Watson, sat in my armchair, a cup of tea cooling at my elbow, as Sherlock Holmes paced before the hearth, his pipe trailing fragrant smoke. The case, marked by the blood-stained handkerchief, the limping footprint, the locket's portrait, the hidden vault's journal, and the tangled alibis of Elias Thorne, Victor Langford, and Canon Beaumont, had reached its climax atop the cathedral's dome, where Thorne's confession had story. A single footprint with a dragging left heel, a blood-stained handkerchief in Thorne's possession, and chalk dust linking to the dome's renovations. These were not random, but staged, a performance to mislead. I nodded, recalling the chaotic morning. The footprint pointed to Thorne's limp, or perhaps Croft's supposed grudge. Precisely, Holmes said, puffing his pipe. The footprint was deliberate, created with a weighted shoe to mimic Thorne's war injury, or to suggest Silas Croft, the sacked verger known for his limp in rumor. The handkerchief, dipped in pig's blood from the cathedral kitchens, was placed in Thorne's hand to implicate another, perhaps Langford, whose muddy boots we found. But the blood was too fresh, too conveniently placed to be genuine. He rose, retrieving the journal from the hidden vault. Hargrove's private notes revealed the motive. He discovered Thorne embezzling restoration funds to cover gambling debts. Hargrove, no saint himself, was blackmailing Thorne, threatening to expose him unless he repaid the sums. The locket found in Hargrove's study was not Clara Hargrove's, a fiction, but Thorne's sister's, pawned to fuel his vice. Hargrove kept it as leverage, a cruel twist. I frowned, the locket's portrait vivid in my memory. Clara was a red herring, then? A distraction to shield Thorne's sister? Holmes nodded. A masterful misdirection. Thorne invented Clara's illness to justify Hargrove's diverted funds, casting suspicion elsewhere. The anonymous letters, "The blood of the innocent will stain your hands," were Thorne's own, written to sow chaos and paint Hargrove as corrupt. Their script matched the note framing Croft found in the warehouse. He spread the clues on the table. The handkerchief, the locket, the journal, the crimson thread, the pawnshop receipt. Each was a thread in Thorne's web. The crimson thread, torn from a ceremonial robe, implicated Canon Beaumont, whose reforms Hargrove challenged. The muddy boots point Langford's investors, Beaumont's choir, all held yet crumbled under scrutiny. The chalk dust, found on the steps in the study and on the Golden Gallery, tied to Thorne's duties overseeing renovations. His limp, genuine but exaggerated for effect, sealed his guilt. I shook my head, marveling. But the watch, Holmes, the missing pocket watch, a robbery motive? A distraction, Holmes said. Likely pocketed by Thorne to sell, or sunk in the river with the dagger. Its absence was meant to scream robbery, diverting Lestrade's plotting mind. But the precision of the stab wound, a single thrust, clean, as your medical eye noted, Watson, spoke of intent, not haste. He lit another pipe, the smoke curling like the fog now fading outside. The moral, Watson, is sobering. Ambition, unchecked, corrupts, even in sacred places. Hargrove's greed in blackmailing Thorne mirrored Thorne's own in embezzling funds. Both fell to their flaws, staining the cathedral steps with more than blood. A lesson in human frailty. I sipped my tea, the fire's warmth a contrast to the case's chill. And Clara's absence? No niece at all? Holmes smiled faintly. A ghost, conjured by Thorn to shield his sister, whose locket Hargrove held. We verified with Lestrade. No Clara Hargrove exists in Bloomsbury or Cathedral records. The portrait was Thorn's sister Ellen, fallen on hard times due to his debts. Hargrove's journal used Clara as a code, a private jest at Thorn's expense. The dawn light strengthened, painting Baker Street in hues of gold and gray. "Justice is served, then," I said. Thorn confessed, and Croft is cleared. Holmes nodded, his expression reflective. Thorn awaits trial, his confession secured atop the dome. Croft, a pawn, returns to obscurity, his rants vindicated but his life scarred. Langford and Beaumont, though complicit in their own schemes, walk free. Such is truth. Hargrove and Thorn forgot this, and paid the price. As Mrs. Hudson bustled in with breakfast, the case closed, leaving only its echoes. The cathedral steps, cleansed of blood, stood as a reminder. Even sacred places harbor human flaws. But truth, like dawn, will always break through.